Now the next step is dispatching an event within the class component. What we have done so far is just handling the global state in the class component. So if I click any item from this class component, there is no item added to the cart. The reason is we have not yet configured the event. So let's do that. The first step is I'm going to copy the onChange code from the functional component because that's the same, and we'll be making few changes to it. So here I'll paste onChange. But we do not have the purchase handler at the moment. The next step is we have to write mapdispatchtoprops. Now this method receives the dispatch object, and this is where we are going to configure the event. This mapdispatchtoprops will be passed as a second parameter to the connect method. And let's say we are going to have the purchase handler. Now the key here is that there is the event object passed, and here we are going to say dispatch. And this is where we pass the type. So I'm going to say purchase. Now if you observe the functional component, when we say dispatch, then there is the data manipulation happening here, like this event target is getting generated, and then we have the obj that is passed as the payload. Here in the purchase class component, when you say the E is certainly passed to the purchase handler here, but here in this particular return statement, you do not put everything like this. Let's just copy this, and I'm going to create another function which we call as action creator. So I'm just going to create a function saying const action handler. I can say action purchase for that matter. And then inside this function, I will write this code. Now inside the dispatch, what if I call this action purchase? It should not work. The reason is dispatch is always expecting that there has to be an object literal, and that object literal should have either one key, that is type, or it can have two keys, that is type and payload. Then what you can do, you can call this function action purchase, and later if the same object is returned by this function, then dispatch will not mind. The reason is dispatch anyway is receiving the object which is expected. So let's try to add a function instead of object literal, and that's what we call as action creator. Action creator is normally configured when we have the asynchronous process inside Redux, and that we are going to see after a couple of sessions. But here also, because we have a need that there is some logic we need before we dispatch the action, so in such cases we can use this pattern, that is the action creator pattern. In fact, in normal Redux, that is even without the asynchronous process, it's a good practice to have action creator pattern. So let me just return the same thing which we were returning from this place. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just copy everything from this purchase handler, and I'm going to paste it here. That is the first thing. Second, certainly it will receive the event object here, and that I'm going to pass inside this dispatch. And now instead of dispatch here, I'm going to say return. So this object is returned. Now we have configured the event handler. The next step is this purchase handler now cannot be called directly, because once you say map dispatch to props, that means your dispatching event is configured as props. So we configure this products state as this dot props. Similarly here also I'm going to say this dot props dot purchase handler. Now let's just save this and let's check the output. So if I click the hook based component, certainly it adds to the cart. But now let me click the class based component. You can see that it adds the value to the cart. Not only that, it adds the value to the total as well. So let me just say grapes here from the class component. So now we have configured the class and Redux together. So this is the syntax basically. So here we not only try simple dispatch, but we implement the action creator pattern. Now let's talk about relative questions. The first question is, how do you dispatch events in a class component while using Redux? So inside a class component, when you have to dispatch an event, the very first thing is that you import the connect like we have done here. Then for example, in this case, we try to have a purchase handler. So you use this.props.purchase handler because it is Redux who takes care of the props in the local class component. So you write it like this, the event. As long as this particular code is concerned, we have used the action creator. I am again explaining in a moment what action creator is. But another important thing is that you have the mapdispatchtoprops method, which receives the dispatch object, again thanks to Redux. And with that dispatch object, you actually dispatch this kind of object literal straight away. But in this case, we have the action creator. We implemented the action creator. So inside dispatch here, we have a function. And then at the end, you have the connect method, which has two arguments. The first is mapState2props and the second is mapdispatchtoprops. You can name this function whatever you want to, but generally we see that we follow certain naming conventions while working with Redux. The second question is, explain the action creator pattern. So here again, you could have written dispatch like this. So let's observe these two statements here. The one is purchase handler dispatch, and there is a function return inside. Whereas in the second line, we have the dispatch, but I'm writing the object literal. That means the dispatch is taking an object literal as an argument. In fact, when I'm writing the function inside the dispatch, it does the very same thing because this function is returning the object literal. But the point here is we had few lines before this object is passed to the reducer. We wanted few processes to execute. Now in this case, we do not have any asynchronous process, but as we proceed, we will see that we'll be using asynchronous process. Even in that case, you cannot write object literal directly here. So dispatch sends this object to the reducer, which you already know. So if you observe these two lines, the first line shows that this is the action creator pattern, and in the second line, we don't use the action creator. It's always a good practice to have action creator whenever you have an asynchronous process, or even in absence of asynchronous process, you can certainly use the action creator pattern the way we have used here.